this one is going to be a lot of fun. As a development team member, I want to categorize donors into different tiers based on their total contributions. This is basically, we want to have a tier or a level based on the total amount of the donations lifetime for each donor. And would like to see that information at the account level. There is so many different ways to approach this that some of them are actually better than using a flow. Knowing that we have an object called donor gift summary, which already does that in the background, if we have the if we have it set up correctly, and we have a process running every night to update it, then it's gonna have all the information that we need. So you can run a report. You can run a report on donor gift summary with accounts, which will show you the total donations from each donor, just line by line. Then you can probably add a row level formula to just or a bucket column where you just bucket donors based on the amounts of the total lifetime donations. This is one way. Another way is to create 2 reports instead of 1 and filter them. One for any donations that are any donor gift summary where the total donation is less than 1,000, and then the second report is more than 1,000, and then you grab these 2 as components onto a dashboard. A third way is to create a roll-up summary at the account level to roll up from the gift transactions onto the account into a currency field, and then you name this total gift amount, and then you create a formula field where you add an if statement. If the amount is less than 1,000, then small. If the amount is more than 1,000, then major. We're not doing any of those ones because we want to use flows for the purposes of this course. So we're going to use a different approach here. And that approach is that we're going to create a pick list field at the account level where it says where the values are small and major. Let's start looking at our notes. So we're going to create a pick list field at the account level. I have already created that pick list field. If I were to go to any existing account, I have this tier pick list field which has 2 values, small and major, and then we're going to create a custom metadata which is almost identical to objects. If I were to go to setup and search for custom metadata, and then I have this object that I created, or custom metadata that I just created. You would notice that the API name is tier_MDT, as in metadata. Typically, the custom object is tier_C. Like this. If we go to any object, we need to look at a custom object. No custom objects like this, __C. All right, so I have created this object tier, and I created a couple of fields on this object, similar to how you create an object and then you create some fields. I created the lower end and then the upper end, and both of them are numbers. So what we're trying to do here is that we need a tier name and then the lower end of that tier and then the upper end of this tier, which is the range basically. When we click manage tiers, this is going to take us to the list of records that are part of this object. Let me create a new list view for a second where we add all fields. I'll just drag these there and save. So we have created 2 records. One record where the label is major and the lower end is 1,000 and then the upper end is 5,000. and then we have small, where the lower end is 0 and the upper end is 999. So I've got like 2 records, and then we're gonna use these later on in the flow to check against. So we're gonna first go through the gift transactions, aggregate the total donation amounts, and then take that amount and compare it to these 2 records. See where does it fall in here. Okay, we already have this custom metadata set up. Now let's go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and create a record triggered flow to run on create and update. And if you notice, when you create a new record triggered flow, you can't get it to run on create, update, and delete. You can only get it to run on create/update. Meaning, if you need it to run on delete as well, then you're gonna have to create another flow that would run on delete. So basically, the logic that we're gonna add to the flow is going to go through all the gift transactions that are paid, calculate, perform an aggregate, result, like the result is gonna be the total gift amount. So that calculation, we need it to happen whenever we create a new record, whenever we update the amount of an existing record, and whenever we delete a gift transaction. Because we're gonna have to have 2 flows to do the same set of logic, then it might be a good idea to just make a subflow. Okay, let's go ahead and build that. We're gonna go to flows, new flow, starting from scratch, record triggered flow. We're gonna this on gift transaction whenever it gets created or updated. Now, I want it to run whenever there's like 2 sets of conditions. I want it to run if it's new, and if I were to do this and I set the ID gift, the ID is null true, later on I'm gonna know that I'll find out that I can't do that because I'm gonna have to update the account, and the account is not the same triggering record. If you remember the context around before save and after save. For before save, I can update the triggering record only, but if I need to update some other related record, then I will have to go with actions and related records. And if I go with actions and related records, the ID is not going to be null. There is always going to be an ID because this is running after commitment. So we can't do that. Alternatively, I'm going to use a formula. So I'm gonna have like 2 lines. The first line is conditions for new records, and then the second line is gonna be conditions for updated records. I'll just drag this down. What are the conditions for new records? How do we first identify if this is a new record? There's a function called isNew. It's gonna tell me if this is a new record or not. Okay, if it is a new record, what other conditions do we need? We need to make sure that the status on the triggering gift transaction status equals paid. And because this is a pick list field, I would rather use isPickVal. And I'll just cut this into this. You can use text before this one to convert it to text, and then equals the whatever value. I would rather use isPickVal to know that this is a pick list. And here I'm going to say this is paid. We can add more conditions like the current amount. So I can set the current amount to be greater than 0. So this is the first set of conditions. I'm just going to add all of them in between parentheses like this. And then I will add an OR statement. So I'm done with the conditions for the new records. Now let's add the conditions for updated records. For updated records, I'd like this to run whenever the status equals paid. I'd like that to be there. And whenever the status gets updated, to be paid. So we're gonna use is changed and is changed, and then we're gonna add the status in here. So this is whenever someone updates the status to be paid, then we need this to run, right? We can make this even more restrictive by saying where the current amount is greater than 0. You know, I can even add more to this. We would like this to run only, would like it to run also when the current amount changes. So let's add this like this. I'm just like adding as many conditions as possible. You could think of the most possible scenarios to happen and just add conditions for these. Okay, the last thing I want to add here is that if someone changes the status must be paid anyway, and the current amount might change. So if someone changes current amount, I just add is changed here. It's changed and then current amount. So whenever the current amount changes where the status is paid, we'd like this to run as well. Right, I'll just get rid of this, and I'll get rid of this, and we've got basically 3 different scenarios in which this flow would run. Now, you would notice that I'm repeating some things like the status here, it's paid, it's paid, it's paid. That's like the same thing being repeated multiple times. And I would rather do that. So I would rather have like, this is one scenario, this is another scenario, and this is a third scenario, over just, you know, like adding and or, and like complicate this even further. It's already to some extent complicated. So if I were to just like make it only one and then add a bunch of and or, and it might not be very readable. I think it is very readable to just have every scenario in a line. Let's check the syntax to make sure that we've got everything right. Something is definitely not right. Is big val got its parentheses here. Is change should have 1. Maybe this is the extra one. No, it's not. No. I'll cut this just to find out where that one is. It's not on this line. If we were to cut this one, it's definitely on that line here in the middle. Okay, so let's see. Is big val, we've got start in parentheses and end in parentheses here. Is changed, we've got one here, I've got one here. This is greater than 0, and then that could be the extra one then. Okay. And since we have the is changed operator here, then we don't mind this running every time because it has to evaluate for each one of them. We're accounting for every possible scenario. And then we'll keep this at actions and related records. Okay, very good. Just copy this in case things go wrong and I have it in the clipboard. Okay. Now what we need to do next now is to grab all the gift transactions from this donor, from the same donor, and then aggregate, take that result of the aggregate and update the account. Let's start by getting all the gift transactions from the same donor. So we're gonna get gift transactions, gift transaction from the same donor. So we're saying donor ID equals the triggering gift transaction, donor ID. And we're gonna get all of these records, and the information we need is basically, I think the only information we need is the current amount. Okay, now after getting these gift transactions, we can transform this. So transform let's do the source data and target data first. With the transform, you're basically taking some data and then you're transforming that data into some other type of data, or sending this to some other type of data. So let's just like set up the target. Where are we sending this? So we're gonna need a currency field or variable or output. That's like the total. The total is just a currency. So we're gonna create a currency here as the output. And then where is that output coming from? It's coming from this list of collections. So we're gonna select this, give transactions from this collection. Now, what are we doing? Like, what we're going through this collection and we're performing an aggregate. To do that, I'm gonna click on the collection, not on the field, on the collection, and then I will map it to this output currency. It automatically opens the aggregate transformation. We're gonna perform in aggregate a sum aggregate, when we're saying we're aggregating the current amount. So this is what the transform is doing. It is going through that collection under the hood, performing this aggregate, and then the output is being put on this that doesn't have a name yet, but once we add a label, it will have a name. So I like to name transform elements with the output. So the output from this is total donation amount. Now you'd notice after I click outside, the name is gonna show up here. So the name is now showing up here. So I've got the total donation amount. Now we're gonna need to take that amount and compare it to the tiers that we have existing in the system. So to do that, I'm gonna have to grab these tiers first. So we're gonna query get tiers, and then the object name is tier, and then we don't need conditions. There is only 2, and I need both of them. And we're gonna get all of the fields. Then we're gonna loop through these tiers, iterate through them one by one, take the first tier and compare that amount to that tier, and then take the second tier and compare the amount to it as well. Loop tiers. We're looping through these tiers, and then for the first iteration, we need to check if it falls within range. Let's say total donation amount falls within range. That's a question. I like to make decision elements in a form of a question. Yes and no. Almost every decision I create, 99% of decisions I create are in a question-like format. And there is a benefit to it. Sometimes you want to use the yes API name elsewhere. So when I do that, you could use yes elsewhere. And this is also nice because basically that's like being repeated in 3 different places, like the label, the API name, and the outcome API name, which is the same thing. Now, how do we know that? Now we want to check if the total donation amount falls within the range. To do that, I'm gonna get the total donation amount from the transform. I'll just add it twice here. I'm gonna check if it is greater than this amount and less than this amount. So greater than current item from loop. This is the current iteration tier. So it might be the small, it might be the major. So if it is greater than the lower end, and it is less than or equal to the upper end, it means it does fall within this range. And if it does fall within this range, then we're gonna, that's the tier. So if that amount falls, let's say that this is the first iteration, it's going here. If it's 500 and we check, is it greater than 0? Yes. Is it less than 999? Yes. Then small is the tier that we need. So we need to take this value and store it somewhere. Similarly, it's gonna, if it's actually like instead of 500, it's 1500, it's gonna check these 2. It doesn't fall within this range, then it goes through the second iteration, it falls within this range, then we need to take this value and store it in some place. To do that, we're gonna create a container, a text variable, to store that value. So we'll have a text variable tier. So this is the value of tier. It's a text. I'll create this, And if it does fall within this range, then I'm going to use an assignment element to assign that value, assign tier. And we're going to grab that current item from loop label. I don't know the difference between master label and just the label. I think they're the same thing. All right, so we're taking the label of this. So we're taking either small or major, whichever meets the criteria. And then we're taking that keyword, the name, and we're putting it into a text variable tier. When we created this tier pick list, we gave it two values, small and major, and we named those two records in the custom metadata, small and major as well, so that we can just take that value and that matches that value in here. Okay, we've got the value of the tier into text field. Now, after this loop is done, we already got the tier, and we need to go to the account to update it. So we're gonna add an update records here. We're gonna say update account, or maybe donor. We've got a few options here. Use the gift transaction record that triggered this flow. No, we are not updating the gift transaction. We're updating a related record, the donor. It says here update related records. Well, that's what we need. Just going through the remaining two quickly. Use the IDs and all field values from a record or a record collection. If we have previously assigned values to a record variable, then we can use this option. We might come across this situation at a later time. And then this is like if you would do everything manually here. So you select the object, and then you select the criteria for the records to be updated, and then the criteria, and then you set the fields yourself. You're doing everything manually. We're gonna go with update records related to the gift transaction, and I will select from the triggering record the donor record. So this is what we are updating. It's going to open the fields. I'm gonna click outside so that it just selects this record. And then down here, we're going to specify which fields are we updating. That section here, what this did is that it populated it's like it told the system the ID of the record that we are trying to update. It's the same. So we're trying to update an account. The system wants to know what is the ID of that account that we are updating. We're saying it is the ID that is on the triggering gift transaction on the donor ID field. Now, which field are we updating? We're updating the tier field. What value does it have? It does have the value that we stored earlier in a text variable tier. Okay, we've got this running. Let's say this is a set tier create / update, because we're gonna need one on delete. Okay, let's activate this and test it first, or probably just debug. Let's see. Let's just grab any record in the system and run. Because we have selected as if the record was as if run the flow as if the records is created, it meets the conditions, the first conditions that we have, where it is new, and then the status is paid. Looks like the record that we selected has a status of paid, and the current amount is greater than 0, so it has run. We're getting some gift transactions. We're getting an amount. It's the total now is 1,200, so the expectation is that it's a major donor. Let's see. When we assign the tier here, it is assigning the major tier to that text variable. And then when we update this record all the way down here, the updated record should have the value of major. We could activate and then test records, but let's do that last. Knowing that this is working, we need to create the onDelete record triggered flow next. And to do that, and instead of just like repeating the same logic again and again, let's do a subflow and then just call that subflow from both places. So I'm going to save this as a new flow, And under show advanced, I'll select the type auto launched flow. And let's name this subflow set tier. And save. We're gonna get a few errors that are basically because of the global variable record. Because this is a subflow now, it doesn't have a triggering record. The record triggered flow did have a triggering record. The triggering record is the gift transaction. So we have a few references in here that are referencing this global variable record, which doesn't exist now. What we're going to do later is we're going to send that gift transaction triggering record from the parent record triggered flow, and we're going to send it down to the subflow, and that subflow then needs to receive that gift transaction in a record variable. So we're going to create that receiver gift transaction. So we're going to create a record variable underscore gift transaction. This is a record of object type gift transaction, and we'll mark this available for input because it is receiving that record from outside. Now we will replace every reference to the global variable record with that new record variable gift transaction. Here, this is one of them. So we're going to replace this with donor ID in here. Right now, this record variable gift transaction is empty, but once we send that value, this record with its values from the parent, then it's going to have this information. Okay, we're gonna also need to update this because it was referencing the related record, but now that the global variable doesn't exist, we're gonna have to update it in some other way. To do that, let's actually select specify conditions. We're gonna do it all manually. What we are updating is the account. What is the ID of that account? That account ID is the donor ID on the gift transaction. This part here was done automatically when it was allowing us to select related records. And then what field are we updating? We're updating the tier with the text variable tier. Let's save this now again and see what happens. The errors disappear. Let's activate. And let's go back to flows. I refresh this to open the flow that we created earlier, sit here on create and update. And now instead of running this, you see now we just repeated this logic here in the subflow. So this is the on create update, and then this is the subflow. Since we are doing it in the subflow now, we're gonna get rid of all of this. Let's delete this, delete this, delete this, delete this, delete this, delete this, and let's call this subflow instead. I'll just search for it like this, and let's set here, and let's pass the triggering record gift transaction. When I click on it, it opens the fields. I'll click outside to select the entire record, and I'll click save and activate. Okay, so we've got this out of the way. Now let's do the one on delete. I'm gonna create a new flow from scratch, record triggered flow, and gift transaction, and I'll select on delete. Now, no need to, you could add conditions. I'll just leave this without conditions for now. And here we're gonna call the same subflow. Set here, and we're sending the triggering gift transaction. What am I doing? I'll just select this and then click outside to select the entire record and save. And let's name it like this. Delete. And let's activate. See the beauty of subflows in similar cases. Right now we might face a problem. We'll look at it. Now let's go ahead and do some testing. I'll just create a new account to start fresh and see just only the needed information. Let's go to accounts, and I'll create a new person account, and let's say that this is echo. I'll just add an email in case there are some processes that may cause this to fail. And all right, so this is echo. Now the tier is blank. I'm gonna add a new gift transaction, and let's set it to paid, completed today, and let's say that's 500, and the payment method is check and save. Okay, so we created this $500. Now the expectation is that this flow was triggered. It falls within this range, so it should set the tier to small. Let's see what we have. It already set it to small, which is good. Now let's try something different. Let's try to add, like, I'm gonna clone this. I'm just creating a second gift transaction now. And let's set this to 1,000. Now that echo donated twice, 500 plus 1,000, that's 1,500. 1,500 falls in this range, so that here should be updated to measure. If we go here, maybe refresh the page, and under overview, it was set to measure. So looks like when we create gifts, it is being updated correctly. Now let's test the scenario of delete. If we go to gift transactions, we've got these two. If I delete this 1,000, now it is back to 500. It should then become small again. If I go here, it is measure, refresh, and measure, which is not the expected behavior. It is supposed to be small. Now, why is it small? Please take a moment to think about this. And feel free to pause this recording. I'll just continue. The reason is when we created this delete, I'll open the start element to look at this section down here. It says before the record is deleted. This is a before delete. Remember when we're talking about before save and after save? This is a before save. It's a before delete. When you create a record, it could be before insert or after insert, like before create or after create. When you update it, it could be before create or after before update and after update. This one is before delete and after delete. We only have the option for before delete in flows. In Apex, we do have the option for after delete, but here we only have before the record is deleted. So basically, we had a record with 500 and another record with 1,000. And when we deleted this, the flow ran, but this record, because it's running in before delete, this flow ran and completed before the record got actually deleted from the database. And the subflow is getting all the transactions, so it actually got both of them, and the output is 500 plus 1,000. It's actually 1,500. So this is not what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do is to delete this 1,000 first, and then calculate after deleting. And here is a trick to fix this. We're gonna end the transaction, commit to the database so that this record actually gets deleted, and then our logic would run. And we're gonna do this with something similar to subflows. We're gonna create a platform event triggered flow. So what we're going to do is we're gonna create a new gift transaction, or update a gift transaction, or delete a gift transaction. Whenever any one of those three things happen, we need an event to be triggered. And then that event should trigger a flow. Let's put it like this. So any one of those three, let's actually do this, and then this, and then this. And this in the middle here is going to be the same event. This is basically platform events. And platform events are like objects where you could create, we're going to perform a create event. It's like it behaves in a similar fashion. It's not exactly a record, it's an event. But when we use a flow to publish an event, we're gonna create an event. And to create to set up the event, we're gonna create a platform event which is similar to an object. It's gonna make sense, a lot of sense in a minute. But basically now, whenever we create, we need an event to be published, which triggers the flow to run. And we need the same event to be published on update, and we need the same event to be published and on delete. And we're gonna see now when we create that event how it's going to solve the problem of B4. Let's go to setup and then search for platform events. And we can, I already created it, but I'll just start over, and then we're gonna use the one that I already created. Let's create a new platform event, and I'll name it recalculate event. So that's the event that we're gonna call from everywhere. And let's put the plural as recalculate events. And you see how similar it is to an object. Now you see something interesting here. Publish behavior. Do we want to publish it immediately as part of the same transaction, or do we need to publish it after commit? So it's going to end the transaction, commits to whatever we had in the transaction to the database, and then this event gets published. So we're going to set it up to run, to publish after commit. I already have one, so I'll just save this. Right, so this is the object or the platform event. It's not different from the one that I created, so I'll just delete this one and let's look at the one that I created earlier. So this is the recalculate event. It's the same thing. As a matter of fact, it's not the same thing. I forgot only one thing. The one thing that I forgot is this custom field here. I created this custom field. It's similar to how we would create just like any field. I created a text field and I named it donor ID. What we're going to do is when we create a gift transaction, we're going to send this donor ID to the event, and then we're going to send this, we're going to create a platform event triggered flow, similar to how we have a record triggered flow. This is a flow that runs whenever a record gets created. We're going to create a platform event triggered flow, which is a flow that runs whenever an event is published, which is almost identical to record triggered flows, except it's not objects, it's events. So the platform event triggered flow, when it runs, it needs some data. So the only piece of information that we need to send over is the donor ID. So I created this donor ID text and saved. I'll cancel because I already created this donor ID. Let's start putting things together. Let's start putting all of this together now. Let's start putting all of this together. Let's go to the create record triggered flow that we created earlier. I'm gonna start closing things because I get confused. I'll go to setup. Let's go to flows. And we created this set tier create update. Now I would like this flow to publish this event, and the way it publishes an event is by just creating. So I'll just say create element, create okay, that's fine, recalculate event, or publish, like you might want to name this publish recalculate event. And we're going to select manually to select the object ourselves, and then we're going to say recalculate event. You see now, recalculate event is like you find it under object like anything else. We've seen a couple of things that are behaving similar to objects. We have the objects when we have the custom metadata, and we have the platform events. So you see the pattern that keeps repeating itself. We're going to select that recalculate event, and we have only one field that we need to populate. That's the donor ID. We're going to send the donor ID from the triggering gift transaction donor ID. And now we don't need this subflow anymore. Let's save this as a new version and activate. What we did so far is that we are publishing this event. We are only doing this section here. It's actually on create and on update. So we're basically doing this section here. Whenever it gets created, it publishes this event. Whenever it gets updated, it publishes this event. Now, let's do the same thing on delete. We're going to go to the delete flow. And we're going to do the same thing. I'll get rid of this and we will create, let's say, publish recalculate event. Select manually, recalculate event, set the donor ID to the triggering gift transaction donor ID. Save as a new version and activate. Okay, so now we are done with this part here. The remaining part is the second one. Whenever that event gets triggered, we need the flow to run. To do that, we would close these again. We'll create a new flow and we'll select platform event triggered flow. Which platform event? That's the recalculate event. And then we need our logic to run in here. But so far, what's happening is that whenever we create a new gift transaction, it's going to publish an event. That event is going to trigger this flow that we are just setting up to run. And that flow is the one that we need to perform the all the logic that we had in the subflow. If I were to go here and search for the subflow, I wonder if I still have it here, subflow, it doesn't exist. Sadly, one of the missing features of platform events is that we can't call subflows from here. So we're going to have to actually do the logic in here. So we don't have to do that. I already did it before the recording. There it is. So it's basically the subflow. I'm just doing everything that we had in the subflow again in here. Same thing. Now, a few tiny differences. All the information that we have in here is the donor ID. The only piece of information we have on the platform event is the donor ID. So when we perform the get gift transaction, we're accessing that platform event and then we're accessing the donor ID in here. And when we update the donor down here, we are also using the same thing. We are using the donor ID in here, the one that we sent over from the platform event. Okay, let's save this and activate. Okay, I think we got everything in place now. We have, let's look at this in the list view. I'll close all of this. Okay, this subflow we are not using anymore because we took all the logic in here and we added it into this platform event. So we have the create, which creates the event, and this flow is listening to that event. Whenever it gets published or whenever it gets created, this flow is going to run. And we also have it on delete. It's going to publish the same event. This one is listening to it. Whenever it gets published, this one is going to run. And because we set up the event to run in after commit, then it's going to run after the record is deleted. Now let's go back and test the same scenarios that we were testing earlier. I will just clone this again. You know what, let's set this back to none for a second. Okay, now there is no tier. If I clone this one and create a new one, let's just say that's 600. Now 500 plus 600, that's over 1,000. Then it should be major now. The expectation is that this becomes major. Okay, this is working as expected. Now let's delete it. And then let's refresh, and the expectation is that this becomes small because under here we only have one, which is 500. Now it should be small. Let's refresh and see what happens. Now it is small. I told you this one would be fun.